Good morning. My name is Jonda Buck, and I have the opportunity of serving and volunteering with the Motherless Daughters Ministry. And each Monday morning, we bring to you a video that we hope will in some way inspire or motivate you or educate you. This is the second video in a series that we're doing for the month of July, focusing in on emotional intelligence. And last week, I'm hopeful that you had a chance to see that. Last week, we focused in on the very first component of emotional intelligence, which was self-awareness. And self-awareness is that great awareness of our emotions. It's recognizing how our behavior has an impact on others. It's making peace with our past. It's recognizing our relationship patterns. So my hope is, again, that you've had an opportunity to watch that. If you haven't, jump out to our website and go to the 4M4U tab and you can watch that video. Now that hopefully you've had an opportunity to practice some self-awareness, we're going to move into the second component, which is self-management. Self-management is defined as the ability to effectively manage and respond to an emotional experience and then be able to engage your feelings in a healthy way. Self-management is largely about self-control. With greater levels of self-management, you'll be able to better prepare for encounters with somebody who may push your buttons a little bit. And as a result, you're better prepared to manage how others have an impact on your behaviors. So let's take a look at what this looks like. Have you ever given thought to the fact that ultimately you have control over your response to your emotions? And this is a pretty bold statement. I've met some people along the way who disagree with this, but I stand firm to this principle. Jack Canfield, who is the author for the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, has this to say. He says that you only have control over three things in your life: the thoughts you think, the images you visualize, and the action you take. That's pretty powerful. First, let's think about the stories that you tell yourself. And if you're anything like me, I love to tell myself stories, and I'm going to be really candid here. Usually they're not very positive stories. So picture this: you're lying in bed at night. This is when I choose to tell myself these stories. When I'm lying in my bed at night and I'm having a really difficult time falling asleep, I choose at that moment, because it's so opportune, to go back and replay situations that may have, already occurred, or I lay awake and I think about things that I need to do or conversations I need to have. And before too long, if I'm not careful, the stories that I'm telling myself take this really dark, negative turn. And in doing that, I can have a whole conversation with myself. And in some situations, I can even have an argument with another person. And what happens when my stories go south or negative, my motive often goes south with it. At the moment that we slip into this downward spiral, it can seem a little bit daunting to get back out of it. But in looking at where our actions come from, it's important for us to go back to what we actually saw or heard. And this can help reset your story, because our stories arrive from we see or hear something and we feel an emotion. And this is not to suggest that you stop feeling emotion, because our emotions are going to happen regardless. But what happens after we feel that emotion is that we tell ourselves the story. And this is where we have that pivotal choice. We have an opportunity to tell ourselves a positive story or a negative story, and then we take action. If we are managing our stories, telling ourselves more positive stories about situations, that is a fantastic step towards self-management. One thing that I've learned is that if I don't control my stories, they'll control me. And my guess is it's probably the same for you. Another aspect of self-management is to accept our feelings. Now, this is so much easier said than done when our feelings are positive, or they're light, or they're happy, or they're joyful. But when we experience those moments where we feel deep sadness, or loneliness or anger, confusion, or self-doubt, that can seem really overwhelming. However, accepting the emotions for what they are and recognizing that in the moment, you will not always feel the way that you do. There will come sunshine, I guess, if you will. There will come moments where you won't always feel this way. Practicing positive self-talk is so critical. I know you guys have heard this. I'm quite positive you have. But oftentimes practicing this ourselves is very challenging. For those of you who grew up maybe in your childhood was void of the nurturing care from a parent, having positive self-thoughts may be very challenging. Even if you get positive feedback or positive reinforcement for someone, you may be tempted initially to want to thwart that. You may think, what is it that you want from me? Why are you being so kind to me? If we're not conditioned to have had this, or if we're conditioned that we haven't had this in the past, it may be difficult to receive. So I encourage you to start receiving that and accepting it for what it is. And then also practicing positive self-talk for yourself. Sticky notes on a bathroom mirror go a long way as far as this is concerned. Positive self-talk will also help you with respect to those limiting beliefs that you may have about yourself. A limiting belief in its most simplest of definition is, again, that voice that you hear in the back of your mind that tells you you'll never be good enough for X, Y, and Z. You won't be successful at this task, or you're not deserving of something. Positive self-talk helps you tell yourself a different story about that. Now, there are many other ways to manage self-management, or many other ways to work on self-management. But the last one that I have time to cover is giving yourself grace, giving yourself permission to have patience with yourself. And rather than focusing on maybe all of the things that you didn't do well, focusing in on the positives. I live in the South, and we like to monogram everything in the South. So some people I know have that monogrammed set of boxing gloves. So put those things away and practice giving yourself some grace over the things that you've done well. I promise if you start practicing some of these things, you'll soon find yourself with a different outlook, perhaps a more positive outlook, whether it's holistically or in a given situation. Please join me next week as we move on into social awareness. Now, for those of you who have challenging relationships, this one will heavily resonate with you, I promise. We'll talk specifically about what we see and hear in those relationships and maybe how we can respond to that differently. Until next week, I hope you're well and I hope you are blessed. Have a fantastic week.